And this third passage, a treatise on the Haudenosaunee and their use of wampum. Wampum, those shell beads that were a form of communication, a feature of language, a way to encode their constitution, and also a means of trade. And yeah, like the Europeans thought of it as just a means of trade, but it was so much more than that. So when I describe the passage, notice that the whole description is about the importance of wampum. And I point that out because I thought question 14, the main point question, was especially difficult because for 14, both B and E looked very similar. And so I'm going to focus on the difference between them. In B, the whole focus is on the wampum and its importance as a communication tool, just like in our passage. In E, the focus is on what historians have done. Many historians, the subject of the sentence is historians. And that was not the subject of the passage. E is true, absolutely. You know, I think there's strong support that E is true, but the question wasn't which of these answer choices is true. The question was which of these answers is the main point. And the main point of this passage was not about historians. It was about wampum and its role in the Haudenosaunee culture. Question 15, why do we talk about fishing? Well, go back to the passage. That second paragraph starts describing it in the very beginning. Loose beads, in line 19, constitute the simplest and oldest form of wampum. By the end of the paragraph, I'm in line 33. Later, loose beads were strung together, forming string wampum. So we're describing an evolution of the use of wampum. Why do we talk about fishing? It was an example of one of the earlier uses of wampum. Answer choice E, it's a traditional practice that reflects a stage in the evolution. One of the earlier uses, a stage along the spectrum. For 16, what's the last paragraph doing there? Well, we're told in the very first sentence. It was the formation of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy that formed the impetus for line 40, making wampum a deliberate system of arbitrary and pictorial derived symbols. And then we go on to explain how that happened. That last paragraph explains how the Haudenosaunee began to use wampum as a symbolic communicative tool. Answer choice C, to illustrate how wampum functioned as a system of symbolic representation. And, you know, the same idea is holding here as has held throughout. When we're asked the question, it's got an answer. It's in the text. 17 is just a slog. But here's how it goes with answer choice C. What we know is that the earliest, oldest uses were the simple beads there were single beads that represented, where the colors represented different spirits. I'm in the second paragraph, right? That was, according to line 19, the simplest and oldest form of wampum. And then it evolves, and we trace the evolution through the second paragraph and into the third paragraph where that evolution continues. And that evolution led to a symbolic form of communication, I'm in line 39, that is deliberate and is sometimes pictorially derived, but sometimes just arbitrary. So, answer choice C, the ancient associations of colors with spirits were important precursors to. They were early bits on the evolution. And they were foundations of later representation that did not depend directly on these associations. The later uses of wampum was both pictorial and arbitrary. It did not depend on those earlier spiritual associations. I know. 18 kind of makes up for 17, though, because one of the things we know for sure, based on the very beginning of the last paragraph, is that it was the formation of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy that spurred them to start using wampum as that symbolic, both arbitrary and pictorial tool. B, the formation of the Confederacy called for a more complex method of communication. Yes, it was what spurred them to use wampum in this new symbolic way. One of the things I liked about 19, and I did like it more than... I just hated 17 and 14. The rest of these weren't really that bad. But one of the things I liked about 19 is that answer choice E is so small and easy to prove. And you contrast that against something like answer choice D, which might have been a attractive, maybe if you weren't reading carefully. I mean, certainly the Confederacy was an important development in the in the use of wampum as a tool of communication. It was a development, but it wasn't the precondition for its use. It had been used as communication long before that. It's not a precondition. It's such an aggressive statement. It's unlikely to be true. Answer choice E, however, present-day interpretations are not conclusive. Of course they're not. How could they possibly be? And we get direct textual support from that. I'm in line 35. It is thought that string wampum was used to send simple political messages. Try line 50. Council fires possibly indicating talks in progress were diamond outlines. The next sentence. Lines between human-like figures seem to have indicated the current state of... We do not have conclusive evidence about how the earliest, or how any maybe stages of wampum were used precisely. And that is exactly what we would expect. I mean, a small, limited answer is so tasty in my mouth. And that finishes this third paragraph, or passage.